All right, here's how I wanted to start. This is my surprise this isn't the surprise, that's for episode 2.
Okay.
But this is a surprise that I think sets the tone for why we wanted to start this.
I love it.
This
is what arrived?
This is not the surprise.
Oh.
17.3 million high school students in America. Of those, now I just used Riverton as our local high school, so I have a little bit of data from them. Now this isn't the same nationally, but of that, Riverton they've got about 1,500 students, and of those 1,500 students, about 120 came to tryouts. Okay, so I'm going to overestimate and say 10% of the student body tried out.
We're just talking basketball.
Just basketball.
Okay.
Of those, there's about 30 who made the team. Okay, so of the 17.3 million students in the country, 10% try out for basketball. That's 1.73 million people try out for basketball. 30% make the team. That's 540,000-ish high school basketball players.
That's a great stat.
25% of those are in the varsity rotation. Okay, so now you're down to 135,000 varsity basketball players. Now people are going to check the math. It's not perfect, but it's just giving us rough numbers.
Who's going to check the math?
Everyone's going to check the math.
Oh my gosh.
Of the 135,000 varsity basketball players, 5.5% will make a college roster, any size college. D1, D2, D3 college. So right now, or it was 2022, there are 34,000 college basketball players.
I was saying if I could see you reading your phone.
It's
I could not.
so there we go. 1.2% will make it to the NBA.
From college.
So the odds of a varsity high school basketball player to make the NBA is 0.03%.
That's an amazing stat.
So the reason I wanted to start with that stat is that I think as we were talking about why we wanted to start this podcast is that for the kids that are our kids' age or coming up to high school, number one, setting a realistic expectation of what is coming and what can they do to put themselves in the best position to make just a high school team. And I think back to when I played my freshman year in high school, we had 18 kids on the sophomore roster, meaning sophomores and ninth graders. And by the time I was a senior, there were only 4 seniors on our varsity team. So just making a high school roster in general doesn't guarantee that you're going to play varsity high school basketball. So that attrition just getting cut down. So the point of this podcast is, one, again, how do we help kids? How do we help parents set realistic expectations around their kids and making it still a fun experience? And we're going to interview coaches around, okay, what are you looking for when kids are coming to tryouts? What are you looking for in player development? And then if they do make the team, how do they get more minutes in a varsity rotation and prepare for college?
Are we asking the coaches if they know their team before tryouts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't dare ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible to think that you've got almost as good of a chance to be struck by lightning as you do to play in the NBA or play professionally. I don't know if those statistics were only for basketball.
That's NBA, doesn't include overseas, it doesn't include all of that stuff, just to make it to the NBA.
I mean, I'd rather play in the NBA than be struck by lightning, but the odds are about the same. Wow.
Well, and my son Jared, he's coming along and he's 9 years old, and I asked him 2 years ago, I was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Just as casual conversation, like, I want to be in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a dad, it's kind of like,
Didn't you say the same thing growing up?
I did.
So did
Absolutely. And in my backyard, I'd be like, all right. I'd be at the very back end of my court. And I'd be like, God, if I make this shot, I'm going to the NBA. I'm going to be a star I remember this in my head. If I make this, I'm going to be a star in the NBA. I huck it, I miss it. And I'm like, okay, well, if I make this, I'm going to make it into the NBA. I won't be a star, but I'll make it to the NBA. And I made my second shot. Turns out that's why I'm an atheist.
It makes sense. There was no other choice.
Yeah. So that's just what I think that the kids need to understand, and not to squash their dreams, but before we worry about the NBA, let's make a high school team first.
And play at all levels, right? I mean, wow. The statistic, I believe, was 5.5% make it from high school to college, something like that.
Any size college, yeah.
Wow.
So it's less even for D1, but that's D1, D2, D3 college. Isn't that wild?
That's quite a stat. Quite a stat.
So let's give the people what they want, and that's to know who you are.
Oh, awesome. My name is Erik Bland. This is the show of the Eriks.
Yes.
Right?
Erik with a C.
That's right.
Erik with a K.
Which is unique.
Yeah.
We need to tell everyone how we met, too.
Let's do it. Go ahead.
Just showed up.
It's like being struck by lightning, the odds of this happening.
0.03 chance that we met. And showed up to what is competitive basketball at our sons' ages. And I had volunteered to coach and saw a really nice, cool guy sitting there who turned out to be Erik with a K and had tryouts. His son was by far the best player. I don't know if this needs to be on the podcast or not, but
I'm not going to say it.
But I was adamant that he was on the team. That was a foregone conclusion that I was coaching if Jared was on the team. Really a good player, great kid, and so we started coaching. Obviously, I needed help. Erik was there. You got to see this guy stroke a basketball. It's beautiful. And I knew that we would be a good team together. So that's how we came to know each other. Didn't know each other in high school. Didn't know each other sooner than that. Literally just this year got to know each other.
A couple months ago, right?
Just barely.
I guess it's been a few months now.
Now he's seen my worst side. No. Kicking chairs, getting teed up in fourth grade basketball. No, it's been good.
I think that you have been the perfect coach for Jared because Jared is very much a perfectionist, which I was as well. I grew up having my dad be my coach through everything, not just basketball, but baseball and everything else. And I would say that he was pretty hard on me in that regard. And so I've kind of, in all of his sports, been like, I'll be an assistant, but I don't ever want to be the head coach because I don't ever want it to be, oh, he's just playing because his dad is the coach. He's just getting calls because his dad is the coach. So I kind of step back and you asked if I'd help, and I'll always say yes to help. But I think that your general philosophy of just building these kids up is fantastic.
It's tough to coach as a dad, and I'll tell you why. It's tough to be seen as coach, to have, I'm speaking on my own behalf, but it's tough to have my son maybe take serious the things that I'm saying, or, hey, let's implement this, or why does it matter the technique of shooting? I'm just here to play, and that's been tough. My son also plays baseball. He's a really good baseball player, but kind of the same thing, I thought, hey, I'll coach him. And I found that he wasn't nearly as serious. It's just tough being a dad coach, at this level, right? And that obviously changes as they grow up and they get into more serious leagues and competition. But anyways, that's how the Eriks came to be.
Yes. Well, and I think it's important for our kids too, because they're 9, right? I mean, realistically, they're 9 years old, turning 10. When does Brady?
He just turned 10.
He just turned 10.
Just
so
barely,
Jared's going to turn 10 here in a couple months. And I think what is hard for parents to understand, especially as they have these dreams and aspirations for their own kids, is as 9 and 10-year-olds, they've got to develop, I think, a love for the game. Because if you don't love it, everything that we're going to talk about with coaches and the practices and the training and the physicality and the mental aspects of it, if you don't love it, you're going to quit.
Absolutely. I just watched one of the reels that, tends to draw us in, and it says, it's the work that's the treat. And it was relating it to a dog show where the dogs run and they go and they perform and then they come back to their owner and they get a treat. And this one owner had 3 dogs that were fantastic. And they went out and they did what they were supposed to do. And they came back and the crowd noticed, or a gentleman in the crowd noticed, how come you didn't give them a treat when they performed so well? And the moral of the story is, he said, the treat is in the work. The reward is in the work. The kids that love it, they want to be out there and they want to be working. They don't need to be rewarded for doing the work. If they don't have the passion, they're going to burn out when it starts to get tough. So I agree very much with what you just said.
Well, and I think that parents and certain types of coaches can squeeze that passion away, right? If it is that perfectionist and they're yelling and they're screaming and the kid's never good enough, especially at this youth age, I think that they can train the love out of it. They can train the joy out of it. They can train the aggression, right? Because if you're so afraid to make a mistake, you aren't going to try things in games. You need to make mistakes. We went and saw one of the best players in Utah compete, and he had 3 turnovers on the game, but he was trying to make stuff happen. And he does so much more right than he does wrong.
It seems to like none of us will remember the wrong, right? Because the right was so great.
Right.
But you're right. If you don't have a chance to make mistakes, they're all going to make mistakes. When is it going to happen? They're not going to step in and be perfect on day one. It won't happen.
Yeah. And I think we as adults also forget our stages then, right? Like I just always have remembered how to shoot a basketball and how to dribble. But I was there too, right? There was a time where we were struggling and bouncing it off our foot and throwing it to the other team every time we'd come down the court. And we just kind of grow out of it, and we don't remember 8 and 9 years old as well.
I'm embarrassed to say, but in a game a couple weeks ago, there was a young man on our team who also came home to my home after the game who might have shot on the wrong hoop. And, you know, it's embarrassing, right? It's totally embarrassing. But we've all either been there ourselves or we've seen it in a game. It's happened because we've played in how many games and been there so many times. And those are just the things you just kind of live and you just learn, and you hope that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that we can help, again, parents, kids. One of the quotes that has stuck with me for most of my life is by Charles Barkley, actually. He said, if you're afraid to fail, you don't deserve to be successful.
Oh, that's a great quote.
And I thought that was so interesting because that happened all the time in my games. If I was afraid to assert myself. And so in that case, how kind of like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, how are you going to have success if you're too afraid to do it? And that doesn't just apply in basketball, that applies in life, right? Whether that's your profession, asking a girl or guy out on a date, whatever you're looking for there, like you have to actually get out of your shell and do things that you're afraid of.
I love this quote, and it's silly because I feel like I don't do a great job of it, but and I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but fortune favors the bold is so true, right? I mean, it's the people that try and go do, and it just turns out that they seem to be luckiest. So
yeah, you kind of make your own luck. What is your, I guess, I don't want to say credentials because I don't think that we're trying to pose ourselves as these great people to talk on this subject, which is why we're going to interview people who are the actual greats on this. But what is your basketball history?
My basketball history is a lover of the game. Let me first start there. And I played on a team that stayed together all the way through let's start with elementary school, middle school, high school. Still really good friends with a lot of those guys today. And as we got older, some of the kids started to peel off, right, and go to other schools, and you would see them and you'd play against them, and it was fun, and it was always great. But you know, basketball for me was everything growing up. I played baseball too, but it probably wasn't fast enough for me. Basketball was everything. I loved it. I played in high school. I made the sophomore team, and junior year, let me back up a little bit. When I was a sophomore, my brother had encouraged me to come try out for the golf team. So I don't know if this gives me any credentials at all.
This
but
is great.
I guess golf's good because you can play it after. But he invited me to come try out for the golf team. And maybe a year before, I kind of had started to get into golf. And, bought my own clubs, started to play a little bit more, that type of thing. This is going somewhere.
I love it.
And anyways, sophomore year, I was playing on the basketball team, tried out for the golf team, made the golf team. And all of a sudden, the golf team started to go well. During the season, I didn't start out as like a top golfer. There were JV players, there were varsity players. But anyways, by the end of the year, they take 5 players. You go to state. And I was invited to go to state as one of the 5. And I was a sophomore. I was the only one that was not a senior. So I returned as a junior as the number 1 golfer for our school, which was really cool because I didn't even know that I liked golf, right? So junior year came around, and I decided this is probably my path to the next level, playing. I played basketball, and I was okay, but I wasn't the number 1 golfer on the basketball team by any means.
Yeah.
So junior year, I decided that I was going to put all my eggs in the golf basket, and I did. I thought I'll play college golf and on my way to the PGA Tour, right? Not quite, but anyway. So junior year, I decided I was going to hang it up on basketball, and I did. And I spoke with the coach. It was tough. It was really tough. Still don't know if that was the right decision, but good friends with him still today. And that summer, the thing is, the two seasons don't really conflict, but you do summer camps and clinics, and we went to Denver, we went to Idaho, and I started to learn that if you were going to go to the next level and play golf, they wanted to have different scores from amateur tournaments throughout the summer, all your amateur events, your Utah State Amateur, your Artsville City amateur scores. They want all of these scores. And so what I did is I basically played in tournaments every week in the summer. So I went from like hardcore playing basketball and a little golf to totally flipping the switch. And anyways, long story short, had a great junior year, really good junior year. And as a senior, I played okay. I think, though, that the pressure of playing with like the best golfers when you compete, right? Because your number ones meet up and you play together.
Yeah.
It was tough to play. It was harder. There was more pressure. It felt different, right? You started to think, and you see this on the PGA Tour all the time, but you start to think that my swing needs to improve. And so there's more tinkering. And as a senior, I probably played better as a junior, but I played good enough as a senior to still get a handful of college offers, small schools, out of state, one in state. I was offered a scholarship to play at Westminster here in Utah.
Nice.
Which is fun, but again, not credentialed. But as a senior, I ran for senior class president and won. And what that did was, I didn't know it at the time, but because of that and my grades, the University of Utah gave me a leadership scholarship. So I could have gone and played golf until I left on an LDS mission, which is what I did. But instead, I thought I'd rather go to the University of Utah, not move out of state for probably what that was. And anyway, so I took the scholarship to the University of Utah, which is where I went. So am I credentialed? I don't know. I've been in some high-pressure moments, right? And played with some great athletes, played with some amazing basketball players. I know we've discussed a handful of them.
Yeah.
Played with some amazing golfers, probably just athletes in general. And I'm really excited to interview kind of the next up-and-comers, right? And to dive into their mindset and what makes them tick. I mean, there's a different level of talent when you really see those top-level players, or maybe the 5.5% that go on to play college, or the 0.02 that go on to the next level. But anyways, that's a lot of my background. But I've just always been very involved somehow in athletics. Early it was basketball, some baseball, more basketball, and then out of nowhere, just kind of flipped the switch and gave it a run with golf. But Erik, anyway, sorry for the deep background.
No,
Tell us your background.
So I played on the golf team as well in high school. I wasn't as good as you, so I was barely squeaking into like the top 10. And the only like sports fight that I've ever seen in person live and been relatively a part of was in the foursome with golf. We were playing a team at different school, and the guy had teed up the ball in front of the tee box, in front of the tee markers. And so our other guy was just like, hey, out of courtesy, you're in front of the markers. You're going to want to move that back. You're going to get penalized.
Let me help you not get penalized.
Right. And so the guy just flips out like, what are you talking about? They start getting in each other's faces, shoving each other. And we had to break up a golf fight.
Probably
Which
with a
is
few holes left to play,
Yeah,
too.
which
That's
is
the best part. Yeah.
which is nuts. So anyway, that was my high school golf experience. But no, I mean my experience is just growing up loving basketball from a kid. I wanted to be in the NBA, as I mentioned. My dad was the best coach I've ever had, even though we butt heads as much as anything. And then I played through high school. I also was going to go serve an LDS mission. I was talking to a couple of colleges, went on my mission, came back, narrowed it down to one. And then at the time I started dating my wife. I didn't know she was going to be my wife at the time, but it was getting serious. And I had lost a lot of my competitiveness in what I would call growing up while out of the country. So I lived in Russia for 2 years, and seeing just the people of Russia and their circumstances and just the mindset kind of shifted to where a lot of my just fiery competitiveness kind of dissolved away. And so I had a conversation with the coach, said I just kind of lost my drive and wish you the best, and went off to pursue my life with my would-be wife. And I don't regret it in any way, shape, or form, but I'm the classical I could have played college guy who never did. And so I have such mad respect for the people who do, because to be able to play well in a game isn't the same as being able to go through the crap that is practice, to go through the injuries, to go through the physicality of everything and the travel and the actual schedule of college basketball. So I am not a college basketball player and just an average high school basketball player.
Do we need to put this on the podcast of where you met your wife? How you met your wife?
How I met my wife?
I think it's important.
Did I tell you this story?
No, we need to.
All right.
We need to go through it.
The woman who drove me away from college basketball.
That's right. That's why it's on the show.
I was supposed to go to Hillcrest High School in Midvale, Utah. So growing up, elementary school, middle school was all going to that. All my best friends were going to Hillcrest. My dad was the middle school coach for Union. This is a long...
We played Union.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's the
I know
middle
right
school.
where it is.
So my 8th grade year, only 3 8th graders could play on the 9th grade middle school team. And so because my dad was the coach, I was one of those. And
I don't know if that's true.
for tryouts,
for the record.
for tryouts, it just happened to be that his first day of tryouts for the middle school team was the same day as the first day of tryouts for the high school team at Hillcrest. So he had some 9th graders who were saying, "Coach, what do I do? Because if I get cut from the high school team, I want to still be able to come over and try out for this. If I miss the first tryouts, are you going to cut me?" And he told everybody, "Go try out for the high school first, all 9th graders. If you get cut, you've got like an automatic bye of the first day of tryouts here. Come to the second day of tryouts and we'll figure it out if you get cut." Somehow that got translated to the Hillcrest High head coach that he was telling 9th graders not to go try out for the high school and that they should come play for him. And so I remember it like it was yesterday. My dad gets a call from a number that he didn't recognize, and my mom answers the phone. "Hey, it's the high school coach at Hillcrest. He wants to talk to you." He answers the phone, and my dad was not a person that took to telling him what to do kindly. He had a very rough childhood, and he was more than quick to fight people if they wanted to. And so I just see him getting angry and angrier on the phone, hangs up the phone, and I guess the Hillcrest coach had just kind of like reamed him, saying, "You're just this lowly middle school coach. You shouldn't be dictating to these kids whether they should or shouldn't go to the high school team."
Classy move.
He gives the coach a piece of his own mind. And from that moment, he hangs up the phone. He says, "You're not going to Hillcrest." And so my basketball future then was finding somewhere else. So Jordan was the next closest school in proximity. My 8th grade year, they were runner-up in the state tournament, so they'd made it to the state tournament. They have this legendary coach, Hal Hale, who had been there for 30 years, and he had won a state championship back in 1984. He had played in the NBA, just legend.
Yeah.
So it was between Jordan and Olympus, because I had some friends on my growing up Super League team that went to Olympus, and I thought that would be cool, and the coach is also a legend, Matt Barnes. But we end up going to Jordan, and as soon as I commit to Jordan, Hal Hale retires.
Oh, my. Wow.
And so I got a new coach that would come into there. So I go to Jordan, and this is the full circle story of how I met my wife. I go into Jordan my sophomore year, not knowing anybody other than the basketball team that I played on as freshman. So I don't know anyone. Second day of school, I'm in a class called seminary. I'm sitting in the back row, and in walks this girl. And it's like Sixpence None the Richer, like the Kiss Me song. Everything goes in slow motion. This girl walks by on my left side. She's in a yellow shirt, blonde, tan skin from the summer. And she sits in the front row because she was late to class, and all the front row seats are for those who are late.
Yes.
I was early, so I got my back row seat. She turns around, and it's like, like the hair, like flips, slow motion. And she looks right at me, and her eyes just like, I'm just melting. I'm like, this isn't happening. And then she like, this look of recognition happens. And then she waves.
No.
And I'm like,
how do we know each other?
did she know that I'm this freshman basketball? Like, how did she know? Turns out her friend had walked in. It's like the classic story there. Their friend, because I was sitting right in front of the door into the class. So a friend's walk in. Her friend is standing right behind me. She's waving to her friend. So I wave back, and you see just like this subtle shift in her eyes, right? Of like, and then this look of confusion of like, okay. So from that moment on, she was known as Seminary Girl for my whole family. And I didn't talk to her for 3 years. I just was too afraid. She intimidated the crap out of me. And now I did ask her to prom our senior year. So that's a little bit of a stretch. So I did ask her to prom. She said no. And I asked her in the most romantic way over text. Just said, would you
very
like to go
classic. It's fine. It's fine.
She had already been asked by somebody else and said yes. So that's why she said no. But I left on that service mission for 2 years, came back, and a friend hooked us up. And at that point, I wasn't scared anymore. And one thing led to another. And we've been married for 15 years.
I'm just wondering who it was that stopped the greatness. That could have been the .02, No. I just had to know.
No, that's her. It was the best decision of my life, though. So we're in a good spot because now we can make podcasts about
It's amazing.
helping people.
About making the team. I've got to tell you, this is not podcast worthy, but my wife and I also went to high school together, and I was 2 years older than her.
Nice.
But it's kind of funny because I also served an LDS mission and came home, and I still had the drive to go play. And I still remember
Golf or basketball?
golf.
Yeah.
Golf, yeah. And there were still a couple options. But I still remember we were moving out of state to go play, But here I hadn't played for a couple years.
Yeah.
I lived in Brazil for 2 years, right on the Amazon.
Wow.
There was no golf. I mean, but I thought it's fine. We'll get it back, and we'll get going. But I still wanted to. And she was finishing up her degree. And I thought, we're moving out of state to go live, probably not in an amazing situation, right? I mean, and so we opted to stay, and anyways, I was married pretty soon thereafter. But so it's interesting though, because I don't know that anything would have come to be, and maybe life would have been way worse, but what if, right?
Well, it's another point to those numbers that we whittled
It
down.
absolutely
right?
is.
The fact that I have this goal to play in the NBA, but from 7 years old to 18, or in this case 21, there is a lot that can happen in between there. And even if you have that drive, you have the passion, you have everything else, priorities can switch, injuries can happen, luck of the draw of what school you go to and the team you end up playing with and the coaches you end up getting. There's a lot that can get in the way of that. So
I think most of these athletes we're going to interview may or may not. And not that we need to go down this path, but the relationships they're in now.
Yeah.
I don't know, may or may not hold them back, right, from being in those statistics. But, it's interesting. It's interesting. There's definitely some good players, you yourself being one of them.
I was very average.
I don't think so.
The other group of people that I want to interview on here that I think will be interesting is referees. So we want to get some referees on here. We'll see how much they can and can't tell us so they can keep their job.
Yeah, that's right.
But getting the perspective of referees, because so often, you look at the NFL game last night and the outcome of it, every game that we ever watch, the referees come up in any sport of we got hosed or we didn't. And so a referee is a thankless job where 50% of everybody in the building is mad at you with every decision that you make.
It's interesting too. I don't know, at the amateur level versus the professional level, if there's an agenda, but there certainly could be with both.
Yeah.
I mean, biases or whatnot, or just overall, human error. I don't know, but there were certainly some questionable calls in that game last night.
Well, you look at even the high school games that we've been to, and immediately we both gravitate to certain players of like that player impresses me with their demeanor, with their skill level, with
confidence,
whatever, their confidence. And at the same time, you can look at others and say that player doesn't rub me the right way. That player is kind of out of control, or they're a punk, or whatever it is. And so you've got to think that referees have some sort of human nature to them as well, as the game's going on. This player will not stop talking to me. This player will not stop talking trash to the opponents. This player, whatever. I just wonder how they're able to push that down and make the correct call.
One thing I know too from playing high school, and then also in speaking with Lance, a current high school coach, is the coaches have an option to, I forget the exact wording, but basically they can darken or make a selection to not have a referee ref their games, which we'll need to dive into that more too, because I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what all goes into that.
Well, I wonder if coaches too will have their own reputations, right? And I wonder if referees can also say, yeah, I don't want to referee that game too. But
That game, Friday, 7? I can't make that one. I know. I wonder too.
I wonder if they have a preference too of, I would like to ref a rivalry game where the gym is packed and there's a lot of stuff happening, or do they have a preference of kind of a blowout where it's not really that meaningful of what calls they do or don't make, So I wonder if there's a preference of, okay, it's tight, every basket counts, every call counts, and I've prepared my whole life for this, or I'd rather just kind of coast through this and not worry too much.
When do I get paid?
Yeah.
One other thing that we want to introduce to the show at some point is different fun rankings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've both been there, we've both seen it. Different fan bases that show up. We were at a Harriman road game the other night. Harriman's ranked number 1 in the state, I believe, in 6A.
Yep.
And, it was just so fun to see that the fans traveled and they were loud and they were rowdy and
they were coordinated, all in red.
They were so coordinated. It was
had
amazing. They had Moses splitting the Red Sea.
Yeah.
It was awesome, and it's fun to see the support from the different schools. And there's no doubt that's either the administration also that steps up and says, let's support our sports. But also I think the coaching staff really has a lot to say and to do with that. So it'll be fun to talk to, different coaches or players and talk about fan bases and also how that affects how they play.
Yeah.
If it's more challenging in certain gyms, that type of thing.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember there were certain gyms that I just didn't like playing in because of the lighting. For whatever, the dead spots in the floor,
the rims,
and then other gyms where I was like, I wish this was our gym.
When you shoot though, and you don't even touch the rim, I don't see what the problem
is. Air balls are applicable in any gym.
Yeah. Kind of fun. There was a rivalry game on here in our state. It was Utah versus BYU. Always a brutal rivalry. And it was just interesting to see. I can't even remember the player, but there were just a couple seconds left, and he stepped up to shoot free throws.
He's like a 92% free throw shooter.
I was just going to say he's a 92% free throw shooter. Amazing, right? I mean, that's who you want on the line, and if you're the opposing team, it's who you don't want to foul, right? Anyone else, probably. He stepped up, and was it his second shot?
I think so.
First one, swish, great shot. Second one, airballed.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Well, I'm excited to start this podcast. I'm glad that you're here with me to help as we interview. We've got some interviews that are in the works, and I'm excited to get those going. 2 things. Every episode, so for those who've made it this far, I want to take questions from our audience. So whoever watches or listens to this, they're more than welcome to send us questions, and we'll have a link of where you can send those through email. And then we will address them, I think, at the end of every podcast. I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
They certainly could ask questions, too, to players or coaches that we interview, right, to be passed along if it made sense.
Yep. And then the last thing that I tend to do on my videos is I leave a secret code word at the end. And so if they leave that code word in the comments, then we know that they have made it this far and listened all the way through. So I'm going to task you with the incredible, burdensome responsibility of coming up with the secret code word for this episode.
Potential.
Potential
is the code word for this show.
This podcast has a lot of potential.
Hopefully the second show's better than the first, but this is amazing.
Well, I'm excited to put together a ranking system for our second episode that I've got a big surprise for you. So
can't wait.
For everybody else, we will see you over there.
Thanks for tuning in.